In the spring of 1944, in the segregated town of Alcolu, South Carolina, a tragedy unfolded that would echo across generations. A crime shocked a community. A boy was arrested, and within 83 days, 14-year-old George Stinney Jr. became the youngest person executed in the United States in the 20th century. This is not just the story of a crime. It is the story of race, fear, and the devastating failure of justice in America. This is the story of George Stinney Jr. Alcolu, South Carolina, 1944. A small mill town, quiet, segregated, divided by railroad tracks. On one side, white families. On the other, black families. Life was predictable and unequal. George Stinney Jr. lived in a modest home with his parents and 4 siblings. His father worked at the local sawmill. George was known to be kind, smart, and always looking out for his younger sister, Amy. At just 14 years old, George was in the 7th grade. He loved riding bikes, reading books, and taking care of the family's cow. He had never been in trouble with the law. But life in 1944 Jim Crow South meant that even innocence couldn't protect a black boy from accusation. March 23, 1944. 2 young white girls, 11-year-old Betty June Binnicker and 7-year-old Mary Emma Thames, went out riding their bicycles looking for wildflowers. They passed by the Stinney home. George and his sister Amy were outside. The girls asked if they knew where to find maypops, a type of flower. George said no. They thanked him and rode away. Later that day, the girls never returned home. A search party was formed. The next morning, their bodies were discovered in a shallow ditch near the railroad. They had both suffered blunt force trauma to the head. Shock gripped the white community of Alcolu. Grief quickly turned into blame. And within hours, the target became George Stinney Jr. The police arrived at the Stinney home and arrested George and his older brother, John Henry. George was separated and taken into custody. His parents were not allowed to go with him. He was questioned alone for hours. There was no lawyer, no transcript, no witness, just a scared 14-year-old and white officers behind closed doors. Authorities claimed that George confessed to the crime, but no signed confession ever surfaced. There were no physical traces linking him to the murders, no blood, no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses. Despite this, George was officially charged with murder. The black community was silenced. Fear spread. The Stinney family was forced to flee the town under threat of mob violence. The trial of George Stinney Jr. began on April 24, 1944. It lasted just one day. George's lawyer, a court-appointed tax attorney, did little to defend him. He called no witnesses. He failed to cross-examine the prosecution. He didn't even challenge the alleged confession. George never testified. The all-white jury deliberated for just 10 minutes. He was found guilty on both counts of murder. The judge sentenced him to death by electric chair. He was 14 years old. George was moved to the Columbia Penitentiary, alone, frightened, without family, visitors, or support. He wrote letters begging to see his mother. He prayed. He clutched his Bible. He asked guards what would happen to him. His family was granted one visit before his execution. His mother told him, "We know you didn't do this. God knows too." The state refused to reconsider. Appeals were never filed. Time ran out. June 16, 1944. George was led into the execution chamber. He was too small for the electric chair. They placed a Bible on the seat as a booster. The straps were too big. The mask didn't fit properly. Witnesses reported that during the electrocution, the mask slipped from his tiny face. His eyes were wide open when he died. Time of death, 7:30 a.m. George Stinney Jr. became the youngest person executed in modern U.S. history. For decades, George's case was buried under silence. But in the 2000s, civil rights advocates and attorneys began reinvestigating the case. What they found was disturbing. No evidence, a coerced confession, no defense, a rushed verdict. The case was reopened in 2014. A new hearing was held. This time, evidence was reviewed. New testimony presented. Experts testified that George's trial was unconstitutional. On December 17, 2014, Judge Carmen Mullen vacated the conviction. In her ruling, she said, "This court finds fundamental constitutional violations. The confession cannot be considered voluntary. the defendant was not afforded due process. George Stinney Jr. was declared innocent 70 years after his death. Today, George Stinney Jr. is remembered not just as a victim of a racist justice system, but as a symbol. A child who was silenced. A family who never gave up. And a nation that must confront its past to heal its future. George's story is not just about the past. It's about the present. It asks us how many other George Stinneys still wait for justice. We owe it to them. To remember. To speak. To never forget. George Stinney Jr. was only 14, a child lost to fear, injustice, and silence. But his voice still echoes. His name is a reminder that justice delayed is justice denied. May we learn from the past. May we question the present. And may we fight for a future where no child suffers the same fate. This was the story of George Stinney Jr. And now it is ours to carry forward. If this story moved you, please consider clicking that subscribe button